So hi everyone, welcome back to my guide on how to execute a good Ironman. So today we're doing part 3 and we're talking about the swim and we're talking about rolling starts. So if you don't know what a rolling starts is simply put, basically you'll queue up in a semi-orderly fashion and they send you off in groups of 5 to 10, so many seconds apart. And some races they categorize you when you fill out your entry form. You put your estimated swim time, so you have different coloured caps. Some races you just rock on up and kind of self-seed. That's a bit of an interesting one. My advice on that is that just try and be sensible. If you try and go straight to the front, you might get a lot of people swimming over you all day if you're not a strong swimmer. But anyway, so that's essentially what it is. There's pros and cons. I'm not a huge fan. We'll talk about that in a second. But what are the pros are there is less congestion on the swim. So, you kind of reduce some of the contact. Means that the flow through, for example, T1, the swim to bike transition, it kind of manages that. So, you don't get 300 athletes in the middle of the pack dumped into transition at the same time. And then it kind of eases the flow out onto the bike. So hopefully with the kind of idea is to reduce some of the drafting that happens at the start of the bike. So there are a couple of the pros. The other thing about that, from a race organiser's point of view, is that they get more bums on seats. They get more athletes. Bound and no illusion. This is a business. They're here to make money. The other thing is a lot of these races are a 2-lap swim, and often that's so that they can also organise a half Ironman at the same time. So, half Ironman does 1 lap, full Ironman does 2. You can work that out. It's a case of, I think they're here to stay. The big con with a rolling start is it removes the racing. So, do you know what I mean? Like, if you want to break the field up, do age group wave start, so at least we get to race with the guys and girls in our age group. You know what I mean? Because the last thing you want to be is running shoulder to shoulder with somebody with 500 meters to go, and they're in your age group. And the reality is that in a rolling start, you don't know whether they're actually 2 minutes ahead of you, 2 minutes behind you. Alternatively, you cross the line thinking you're in second place and you're going to Kona to the world champs, and then 20 minutes later you're actually in fifth and you've missed out on your slot. Could you have done anything about that in the heat of battle? Don't know. But it does open it up to, I work really, really hard to be a really strong swimmer. I'm a sub-hour guy regardless, whether it's wetsuit, non-wetsuit, whatever. But I work hard to do that. And, one of the cons is if you're a strong swimmer, you're a bit compromised, especially if it's a 2-lap swim. Because, for example, 2-lap swim mass start, guys like me will catch the back of the field by the end of it, depending on how it works out. It's usually sort of, and the sad part of that is generally it's the older athletes or people who are not very strong swimmers, and I feel for them because, they're getting to the end of their first lap and then there's an angry mob sort of breaks over the top of them. Not that anyone intentionally tries to swim over people, but when you're moving along in a pack of fast swimmers and you're doing that micro glance, it's very hard to judge how fast people are going through the water. With a rolling start, back on topic, is the start spread out over a greater time. So, for example, I'm in Malaysia. I caught the back of the field with a K1.5 to go. It's 2-lap swim. So, I was about 800-900 meters into lap 2, and I was catching the back of the field, and they were all over the place. They were doing breaststrokes. Some of them were clinging to buoys, which is a bit disconcerting. It's like, there's nobody to tell you there was a swim. So, you know what I mean? So guys like me, that costs us a lot of time. So we're a bit compromised in that situation because you're constantly having to change pace and move around people. So on that respect, this is going to sound awful, but with a mass start, I clear out, as I said, go through transitions, bugger all people, and then jump out onto the bike, and then I can settle in and go to plan. I want the guy in my age group who is an Uber biker and not a very good swimmer, I want him buried in the pack. I want his 3.8k kilometers, 3.8k swim to be a fight. I want him then to get into transition and there's be 300 people in the air and it's be pandemonium and he's struggling and he's flustered, and then get out on the bike course with a whole bunch of other athletes and hopefully get a drafting penalty while he's trying to work his way through the field. It's awful, but as I've said, I work hard to be a good swimmer. And that's an advantage for me. So kind of rolling starts kind of lessen that advantage a bit. So that's one of the reasons as a strong swimmer. Not a huge fan. Unfortunately, they're here to stay. So let's get back on to topic for a rolling start. Well, what are you going to do in preparation? One of the key fundamentals with a rolling start is they're pretty much beach starts. And because you're standing in a queue of athletes, you don't get a proper warm-up. So what I would suggest, and we'll have some swim sessions either in the supplemental or at the end of the swim section, and I'll go through what they are. Some will be for rolling starts, some will be for mass starts. But one of the things you might want to consider in training is doing a no warm-up swim. Because in a rolling start, standing on the beach, and kind of you just kind of queue, and then you're straight up. So what I would suggest is, and the cool thing about a rolling start is that you don't need to go out hard and try and get on good feet, for example, in the mass start. You can actually build into the swim. So what you do in the pool is you might start and you might do 5 100s, depending on whatever pace. Say you're that 2-minute swimmer. We'll use that, try and use that consistently through. If you're that 2-minute per 100 swimmer, you might do these, say going on 2:15 or 2:30, depending, and just ease into it. So you do 5 100s, and the first one might be 2:05, 2:02, then 2 minutes, then 1:58, maybe even a 1:56 sort of thing. So just kind of practice in training, starting at the edge of the pool rather than doing, drills and all of that stuff. Practice that, or practice getting in the water and swimming 500 meters straight and start out easy and just build into your pace. So practice that in training so that when the race rolls around, you're kind of conditioned and you have the mindset of, right, I'm just going to get in the water and build into it. And it might be, the first boy's 400 or 500 meters away. That's my warm up. Once I get to that can, then that's it. I'm in race mode. Do you know what I mean? But practice in training, so that you're kind of mentally and physically conditioned for it. So that's a little piece of advice. I'd be practicing in the build up. When you get to the race, the race weekend, race week, you need to get down to the race start and you need to practice beach starts because, a couple of things you're looking for. One thing is at any kind of venue, you're looking for current just to make sure there's drift left or right. And you also want to just be down there at about the same time you'll be swimming in the race just to check what the sun angle's like. So that, for example, that you're not, that if you're going to be looking into the sun at a certain point, what are your landmarks, how are you going to see where you're going. And so there are a couple of things, but the reality is practicing beach starts, you want to practice running into the water and then how far it drops off before you start swimming. So some races, it might be 3 steps and dive. Some races, you might actually have to wade out, 30, 40 meters. On that, I would suggest rather than dolphin diving all the way out and then hooking into it, that's quite a high energy cost for the first 2 or 3 minutes of a 8 to 17 hour day. Do you really want to be spiking your heart rate that much at the start of a race? What might be easier is just wade out until it's deep enough. Take your time. It's a long day. Trying to save a couple of seconds right there versus spiking your heart rate and exploding halfway around the swim. Comes back to that. The objective is to get through the swim and still be kind of fresh when you get out the other end, so you're good to go. So practice how many steps in, take a dive, swim out a few strokes, cruise back, and try it at a couple of different points along where the start line's going to be, or the start box, you know what I mean? So that you know where you're going to enter the water, how many steps you need to take, and then when you're going to dive. And but also check, if it's a 2-lap swim, check where you're coming around to start the lap. It might be, for example, you might start the swim on the left-hand side of the box at the start of the race, but you might come around the right-hand side. So you want it in the middle of the race. So you just might want to check the entry, if it's a 2-lap swim, what that entry's like as well. just so it gets in your head. Just on dive starts, goggles on, then swim cap. Not the other way. The reason is that if you dive in, well, and you usually put your goggles on first and then your swim cap over top. So if you lose your swim cap, your goggles stay on. And one of the reasons we're practicing these beach starts is so that when the race rolls around, it's not a new thing for you, so that you can just basically run in, take a dive, and your goggles are not going to peel off and fill with water, so that you're popping up, trying to put your goggles back on when half the field's trying to swim over the top of you, because they're not expecting you to be stopped. So practice beach starts and your dive start. So, just run in, practice a dive, cruise out, so that come race day, you kind of know. And also that you might want to just check, So, for example, I'm in Malaysia. You kind of queue up and then it's a left-hand turn into the water. And the buoy was a sort of the buoy line was on the right-hand side. So everybody sort of ran around, swam sort of a diagonal line out to the swim buoys and swam along that way. Whereas I hooked left, and I had this beautiful patch of water to swim in. It was probably as straight, if not straighter, a shorter line. And I was swimming out to the first can, just building into it. Long day. And I was looking over it as I was breathing. I was looking over at the people going along the line of buoys, and they were tangling up in each other. They were just... It was just a fight, and it was like I was in this little patch of calm water, and it was like, it's just like details, guys, because that was the thing. As I was queuing up, I was looking where everybody was going, and it was a case of, well, they're all swimming over there, and there's a straight line there. I'll have that bit, thanks. And another little thing when you're queuing up, talk to people, ask them, if you're a sub 1 hour swimmer, get to the front. If you're not, further back. But if you're standing with a bunch of people, ask them, say, how fast are you planning on swimming? And if they're saying 1 hour and you're a 1:10 guy, you might want to go, because the reality is that if you start too soon, you're going to have the whole field coming over the top of you. And it's not because they mean to. It's just, as I mentioned, it's when you're sighting, you're having a microsecond look, and you can't judge how fast people are going. So suddenly you have a look, and then the next minute you're over the top of them. So it's a case of, to make your day a lot easier, try and start based on your ability. So where are we at? So rolling starts. Practice a no warm-up swim. Practice your beach starts. If it is a 2-lap swim, what you need to do is also you need to practice getting out of the water and running along. What I would suggest on that is about 50 meters, 100 meters from shore, you want to just depower your arms a little bit, increase your kick a little bit. You want to promote a little bit of blood flow to the legs, but you don't want to spike your heart rate. So you can't, rather than going, just go easy a little bit with and then rather than a big boom boom kick, just a little bit more of a flutter kick, just to pump some blood to them, so that when you go from the horizontal to the vertical, it's a less shock to the system. Some of those races, they'll have an aid station on that little section if you're running along. If there's a sports drink, grab it. Like if it's a saltwater swim and there's sports drink, grab it and take a mouthful just to rinse out the taste of the salt. You know what I mean? That would be what my advice. And again, when you're going back in, practice. How many steps to take, and it's about being process driven. So there's some tips from rolling starts. Practice no warm-up swims. Practice building into your swim. It's a case of, comes back to that, it's, if you build into the swim in a rolling start, it's one of the cool things about a rolling start, you'll actually be able to control your effort over the whole swim and hopefully get to the end of the swim fresh, ready to go. So that's enough on rolling starts. We'll cover other bits and pieces we're going to do mass starts next. And then we'll cover some other bits and pieces on training and racing as we go forward. As I said, it's all about trying to keep these into 15-minute blocks, and that's a challenge with the way that I end up talking too much and babble. So peace out from me. Speak to you later. Bye.